Hello there, and welcome to another edition of Fireside Chats with Moses and Derek. So, we wanted to talk today about a kind of somewhat topical issue, and then kind of dig a little bit deeper on some extra meaning behind the subject matter that isn't really discussed in the mainstream media. So, that topic is about this term kung flu, and we all know the stereotypical or xenophobic, bigoted, anti-racist connotations to kung flu, and that's not exactly helpful in how Asian Americans and particularly East Asian Americans are perceived in the United States. As a matter of fact, it's reported that there's been over 1,100 cases of attacks, whether they be physical or verbal, on Asian Americans, and that's definitely a problem. And anti-East Asian sentiment is really at an all-time high, and that's a problem. But there is an additional, kind of unique aspect of what Kung Flu means to the CAD community. And so I wanted to ask Moses and get really his insight on, beyond the fact that it's just annoying as hell, what are some, side effects and impacts that, we as cats kind of experience? And then we're kind of going to go deeper in a little bit of why that exactly is the case. So, Moses, quick question for you. I think in our previous discussions privately, we've discussed the dangers of Kung Flu, but can you just kind of introduce the impact that Kung Flu has towards our overall health?
Okay, Derek. I want to just start off by saying that it gets under my skin. And it's not just this term, but other terms that have been used that I'm going to refrain from sharing. But I remember, so I want to start off by saying that I remember early on in the outbreak that Stop AAPI hate put on by H3PCon. Um, that was the go-to site to report hate crimes against Asians. So any anti-Asian incidents were reported there, and I just remember statistic coming out saying that there were about 100 new reports on a daily basis. And I believe when those other terms started coming out, those reports escalated exponentially. And through this time, the anti-Asian racism hasn't stopped. It's continued. So what we're dealing with, so the reason why I'm really kind of setting this all up in this way is what we're dealing with is an ongoing response, reaction of stress, anxiety, fear, anger, annoyance in your case. The chronic aspect of this, it really just wears us down. It wears down the body. It keeps us up at night. It affects our ability to stay focused and be able to concentrate. We have just a range of different things that just disrupts our thought process, ability to think, ability to sleep, and it just exacerbates our stress and anxiety and fear.
Yeah, and kind of the problem, I think, what I was really stressing was that because the vast majority of us are transracial adoptees, and because the vast majority of us were adopted into white families, and a good number of us were adopted into, more conservative leaning families that kind of embrace rhetoric like this is that that exposure that you're talking about that wears down on us. The reality is that a lot of East Asian families, their nuclear and extended families, because they're also comprised of other East Asians, are relatively united in opposition of just harmful um, rhetoric like this. But as CADs, we have many times family members that think this is not only acceptable, but repeat it in front of us over and over again. So, what is the harm of that exposure?
Mm. Um, well, I'd say let's put this out to the folks to comment. What has been the harm, and what has been the ongoing harm uh, that existed before the outbreak, before the anti-Asian racism and bigotry, xenophobia, and but you're absolutely right. The internal racism that we grow up with, uh, it just comes to the forefront, right? The internalized racism, the whitewashing, the overall effect of just invisible, feeling we're invisible, and feeling um, unheard and unseen and uh, invalidated. So to answer your question, what is the effect? I imagine that's why so many of us are angry. It's why so many of us are feeling silenced and oppressed, um, and very much alone. So add, add all this together. It is so important for us to reach out to one another. It's so important for us to talk about these experiences and find validation with one another. So at least we can be seen and heard, um, uh, within our own community.
So, I think sometimes, and the reason why I can kind of predict some of these answers is because there's conservative members in my family, and where, if we approach them and say, hey, this term isn't funny to me, and, while you might think it's not a big deal, it reminds me of situations that I constantly have to be on guard, or every time, I go out in public, I'm wondering, is this the day that, there's going to be an attack on me? And then they kind of come back with, well, you're just being, a liberal snowflake or whatever. What are some ways that we can kind of communicate the danger of what people who allegedly love us, insist on doing after we've asked them not to do it? Do you have any advice on how that danger can be expressed in a way that our family members can really understand and get it?
I want to say that these terms are just wrong, and we have to speak up, and we have to tell our parents, our family members, anyone who is either complicit or in our face about it with their ignorance, or uh, overtly supporting the use of these terms. We have to make it clear that it is wrong. And I want to say that the way to go about it is to use childlike language, really break it down to this hurts. This is hurting me, it's causing more pain, it's stressing me out. Um, if you care about me, if you love me, then hear me out. Listen to me. I'm not uh, someone who is in the same world as you. I am a person of color. I am Asian. I'm Asian American. I am a Korean. I'm a Korean adoptee. Own your identity and say that it is wrong and is causing you more pain. That really is the way to address it um, as their child or as their family member. If you love me, if you care about me, then you will hear me out that you are hurting me. Uh, and we have to take that next step, Derek, and say this is racial abuse. And it's really important to understand the many layers of historical pain, historical trauma. We have to make this stop. We have to stop this historical trauma. Um, so speak up, own your pain, tell the people who are um, supposed to be there for you, and call them out on it. So uh, it's important to take whatever angle you want on this, call them out on their being conservative, call them out on their belief systems, call them out uh, on their social constructs, their social narratives that reinforce their ways of thinking, uh, especially during a time like this.
I think it's a really good point you made. And, for those of us that, really don't have anywhere to turn to, you have this community. There are so many people that will just nod their head in agreement if you express the frustration that you're feeling that, members of your family choose to emulate the leader of our country and spewing out just vile, um, bigoted, and dangerous rhetoric. So this should never be something politicized. And the fact that we have even people in our community that support the use of these terms, the consequences of it sometimes can lead to very tragic results. So we're not being snowflakes in the sense that what Moses just said is that repeated exposure to this creates stress and creates trauma, and the body's reaction to that, it does impact our immune system and our ability to ward off infections, viruses, and disease. And by the way, COVID-19 is a disease caused by an infection from a fucking virus. So, really the reality is that this is unacceptable. And if you need support, reach out to us. And, if this resonates, share, how you've handled it, or that you've been exposed to this kind of the support of such language from our politicians. And typical spiel, like it, share it. And I guess we're getting better at this, Moses, right? If you like a video, like it and share it and respond. So it's another Fireside Chat, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
You're asking the questions, right?
Oh, Jesus, I just started recording. Come on, Moses, you're kicking my ass here. Now I gotta stop. Because now, yes, I'm asking the questions.